education. And then we'll have an opportunity for Q&A at the end. So we ask that you hold your questions until then. So today we're very pleased to have Shelly Brouse, CEO of Unity Insurance, to speak to us about how to avoid claims in your practice, risk management tips. Shelly Brouse has been with Unity a number of years and brings a very progressive approach to the organization. And we encourage you, if you're looking at other insurance options, to give Unity a call. Unity has been a partner with Montgomery County Medical Society for many, many years, and we appreciate their support of us and also our practices. So before we get started for this lunch break, I wanted to remind you of a couple of upcoming activities of the Medical Society. First of all, we have our lobby day in Annapolis on Wednesday, February 21st. We have many meetings with our legislators on that day, starting as early as 9 a.m., I believe, and going until mid-afternoon. This is a wonderful opportunity for physicians, and we also have included practice managers in the past, if there's interest, to join us on that day. We get started at 7:45 in the morning with a briefing, and then we begin our visits. There's a lunch also at Harry Brown's that's complimentary. So if you're interested in doing that, or you have a physician who is particularly interested in grassroots legislative affairs, please let me know, and you can just email me. Also, we would request that somebody that's attending the lobby day also participate in our lobby day briefing. This is an in-depth review of the current bills that are pending before the state legislature, things such as scope of practice, tort reform, Medicaid funding, and many, many more. And so we will be talking with them and doing this briefing at 6:30 on Thursday, February 15th. And then a more, not an in-depth briefing at 7:45 on the 21st, but really just hitting highlights about where the bills are in the legislative process. So again, if you're interested, you have a physician who would be particularly interested, my email is sdantoni@montgomerymedicine.org. Also, we have a couple of other activities that you may be interested in, or your physicians. We have one particularly for early career physicians, and we define early career as someone who is 45 and younger, possibly somebody that's just started practicing for the last 5 years, and even someone who is new to the county, or someone who may have retired, let's say, from the military and is setting up practice in Montgomery County. So we base this on the popular TED Talk series. Ours is called Med Talks, and it's 8 minutes and 4 slides. It is February the 22nd at our office in Montgomery County on Crabs Branch Way. We already have a number of speakers, as you can see, and there is no cost for members to participate in this activity. The topics will range from clinical topics, but in the past, we actually sometimes have had things about practice management, and we've had some about, kind of health system reform, what needs to change in order to improve patient care access and care. We also are leaping into OSHA compliance. We're doing this on Leap Day on February the 29th at 1 p.m. This is via Zoom. This is considered an annual OSHA update for your staff. And we have a speaker, Christina Campbell Harris, who is a supervisor with MOSH, and she is going to cover MOSH and OSHA, bloodborne pathogens, hazard communications, of course, the use of PPE, and many other regulations that affect medical practices. For our member practices, it's only $50, and we will provide a link to you, and you can provide that to your staff. It will be a live presentation. And then if your practice does not have a member currently, a physician member, then the rate is $150, and again, you can share that link. So each of these have the way to register on them. And you can go to montgomerymedicine.org/events, and you can register your organization or your physicians for any of these activities. So we're going to go back now and introduce our speaker. We thank Shelly Brouse for joining us. She's a breath of fresh air. As I said, she always has new ideas. And Ron is also on the call with her to answer any questions that may come up. Today, Shelly is going to speak about how to avoid claims in your practice, risk management tips, and then, as I mentioned, we will have Q&A after. She's going to address the most common cause of claims, how to reduce the likelihood of a claim, and then how to protect your practice with insurance. So we expect her to deliver about 15 minutes of presentation. Then, as we have done in the past, we can have Q&A about this topic, or if there are any other topics that you would like to raise a question about, anything going on at the Medical Society, etc., we're happy to address those in the remaining moments. So again, thank you for joining us, and I'm going to turn it over to Shelly Brouse, our speaker. Thank you again.
Great, thanks, Susan. And thank you all for having us on this call today and for participating. I'm going to go ahead and just share a screen real quickly. Just give me 1 second here. Okay. Everybody see that okay?
Mm-hmm.
All righty, there we go. Okay, so we're going to talk about claims. It's a topic that, none of us in our businesses ever want to have to experience a loss. There are, lots of different situations that can occur. But, the reality is that's why you have insurance, to protect yourself, protect your business for those things that happen. It's inevitable that something will go wrong, be it minor or major, but the whole point of having insurance is to give you that protection and peace of mind to get your business back to where it needs to be as quickly as possible. So, there are a lot of things we're going to walk through quickly, and a lot of this stuff is going to seem like no-brainer kind of thing. But the reality is they're simple steps that can be taken that unfortunately a lot of people just don't think about, and they're pretty easy ways to prevent claims from happening. So we're going to talk about things that are more about common in the office environment. We're going to stay away from medical malpractice today and cyber insurance, because they are two topics that would warrant quite a bit of time in their own, conversation. So perhaps, Susan, we can talk about that another time and do another session that we can be more specific in those two areas, because they're equally important, but there's a lot of meat to them. So what I'm going to do is jump in here and just talk about some of the more common causes of claims and losses that you might incur in your practice. The burglary and theft area, this is while it's a lower dollar value in terms of an average claim, that's about $8,000. It is one of the more frequent claims that can happen. Water and ice damage, you think about frozen pipes, leaky pipes, those kinds of things are nuisance claims, but they can cause damage and certainly impact your property. And average on there is about $17,000. We get into hail and wind, storms can cause extensive damage. And if you own your building, obviously there's direct impact to you as an owner. But even if you lease space in a building, you want to make sure that your landlord is taking adequate measures and precautions to keep your, the things that you have in your business, in your office, protected and safe. Those averages go upwards of about $26,000. Fire can be extremely hazardous. About 10% of businesses actually file a fire claim, and the average cost there is about $35,000. Then we get into client accidents. Most common here is your slip and fall. These are liability claims with an average of about $20,000. And then, reputational harm. Certainly not as common, but certainly the most expensive, because this is where you oftentimes get involved in a lawsuit. And, about a third of the claims that come through here do involve a lawsuit, and they can be, on average in the $50,000 range. We've seen some much higher, and we've seen some a little lower. So these are some of the more common things that we see that can happen in your practice, in your office. And I just want to spend a couple of minutes going through some things that you can do to reduce the likelihood of these things happening. And as I said, some of them may seem like no-brainers, but we all have a tendency to neglect sometimes without, full intention. But quality locks, limiting number of keys. A good monitoring alarm system is important. Cameras would certainly be, if cameras are installed in your office. This wasn't a burglary or a theft claim, but my brother-in-law has a body shop, auto body shop, service shop, I'm sorry. And he had a tow truck come into the parking lot and actually clip one of the cars trying to leave the parking lot. It was one of his clients' cars, and the tow truck drove away. And he was able, through the cameras systems that he had, to call the police, let them see the video. They were able to get the name of the tow truck company, get the license plate, and they were actually able to reach out to that tow company and charge them with that because it was a crime. They left the scene of an accident. So those cameras can really come in handy with the footage there. In terms of water and ice damage, I'd say here the most important thing is the routine maintenance and just making sure your systems are up to speed. Parts are current, things are caulked, and things like that, that they're just all the connections are all maintained, and keeping above freezing temperatures in your building, even when you're not there. A lot of us, we leave on Friday afternoon and we turn the thermostat down, and we get those below freezing temperatures, and that can cause a lot of problems with frozen pipes and that kind of thing. So again, sort of no-brainer things that we think of, but they're always good to just make sure you have your checks and balances.
I've add to the, what we
Yeah,
just,
go ahead, Ron.
just getting back to the burglary and theft, just a couple of things. And it's as simple as just making sure your doors and windows are locked when you leave your office space. In our office, about a few months ago, I was working by myself because we're remote a lot. And the front door was left open by a vendor that he didn't lock it completely when he left. And I'm hearing noises out there, and I walk out, and someone off the street had just wandered into our building. And so just making sure your doors and windows are locked when you leave. And also, in regards to burglary and theft, when you do hire employees, it's very important to do background checks. We see a lot of claims resulting from rogue employees that may, steal money or checks, that type of thing. So it's important as well. And with the fire, with the water and ice damage, just, make sure you mitigate, snow, ice, get it removed, parking lots and walkways. And, with frozen pipes, make sure that you don't, that the heating is, the temperatures are kept at a certain setting all the time. And that, a lot of claims happen during long weekends or holidays. And even if you're aware that you have old pipes, you may just want to let your faucets be slightly opened a little bit, so there's constant, drain there.
Thanks, Ron.
Mhm.
So again, hail and wind, these are storm issues that come about. So the more you can do to just make sure your building is tight, they're important. And on the fire, so the routine inspections, we talk about making sure you have sprinkler systems, monitors, alarms that go to central alarm. Really important. Making sure your employees, you think about, fire drills, you do those in school. But making sure that your employees know where exits are, emergency exits are, and things like that, safety drills, and that kind of thing. Best practices in your office for heaters. A lot of us, individuals have different body temperatures. We like our little space heaters. And just, best practices in your office around things like smoking and burning candles and things like that. Again, obvious stuff. But I'll tell you, we had a situation with a client, and this, the monitoring system, the routine inspections, all of these things would have come into play. This was an older building, and they had an electrical fire start at 3 o'clock in the morning. And the way it was discovered was someone happened to be walking down the street and saw smoke and fire through one of the windows and called the fire department at 3 o'clock in the morning. There was no central alarm. There was no, it was an older building. So we're guessing maybe the electrical systems had not been up to, completely up to date. So it was a very, very unfortunate situation, but having some of these things in place, perhaps the damage could have been less. This ended up being a total fire loss. It was really unfortunate for the building. But, you know, some of these things in place could have either prevented that from happening or certainly minimized the damage that was incurred. So these things are really important, even though they seem like they're just common knowledge. And as Ron said, you know, when you get into these client accidents, slip and fall things, you know, these are just basic things you can do, but, you know, making sure you're lighting, you know, keeping the walkways clear, you know, when there are, you know, snow, ice things going on, good rubber mats at your entrance, that kind of thing. In terms of reputational harm, as I said, these aren't as common, but they certainly can be costly. And, you know, the thing here is just within your own practice to be sure that you're living up to your own standards, you're being honest, you're being transparent. If you're saying you're going to do something, do it. You know, you want to build a reputation of your business that gives your customers, your patients, the factor of trust. And, you know, giving that in the community is really important. And when you see potentially those posts on social media, they can be so horrific sometimes, you know, and you want to jump in and just reply back and smack back. And the best thing you can do is just avoid that if at all possible, because you get into really, you know, just those kinds of things going on publicly just never really help anybody and you don't win. If it's on your own Facebook page or your own account, you know, you can certainly delete those comments. And try to deal with them potentially offline. But, you know, you just really want to make sure that you're upholding your reputation as best that you can. And then I'm just going to go in here to just a couple of things. I'm not going to get into a lot of detail, but in terms of the different types of insurance coverage, you know, a business owner's policy is the most common policy for an office, whether it be a business office, a medical practice. It gives you a combination of your property coverage and your liability. So, you know, those slip and fall things, your building contents, etc. And, you know, one thing we'll tell you, and Ron and I've learned this from experience with another client, there was a water issue that caused a leak over a frozen pipe. And it was someone that was in a tenant in a building. And unfortunately, they had not updated their contents coverage for their business personal property. So when the claim was filed, they had gotten some new equipment in their office and didn't increase the value of their overall equipment. So when it came time to pay the claim was paid at the limit of coverage that they had on their policy. And unfortunately, it wasn't enough for them to repurchase all of that equipment. And they were out of pocket some costs because we weren't aware that they had made some changes. And you know, those coverage limits really should have been increased. But there's some things you can add on your business owner's policy. There's, you know, additional coverages you can add for cyber, which again, we would talk about at another time, but that can be added onto that policy, or it can be bought as a standalone policy if the limits and the coverages you need to be a little bit more robust. Employee benefits liability is another add-on. This protects your, you know, HR folks if they make a mistake and forget to enroll someone in the benefits plan, and that person goes to the hospital and they say, oh, you don't have any coverage. This type of coverage on your policy would help you to help that employee, and they would be able to get those costs taken care of. You know, I talked about standalone cyber coverage. The other thing is on employment practices liability. If you're not familiar with that coverage, it's another sort of HR type thing you can purchase as an add-on or even a standalone policy. And that would give you protection in situations where you may be accused of wrongful termination, sexual harassment, and those kinds of things. Those policies will kick in and provide that type of coverage. So very quick, trying to do all of that in less than 15 minutes to allow us some time to ask some questions or answer some questions, or if there's anything in particular you'd like us to talk about in more detail, we certainly can. Ron, I don't know if you have anything else to add in a quick summary.
I think the most important thing is just to mitigate the claims so it doesn't get any worse. When you have damage done to your property, whether it's boarding up your windows or your doors, or if you own the building and you're able to get, you know, tarp on a roof, if there's, you know, a hole in your roof or missing shingles, just to help the claim from getting from bad to worse, I think is very important as well.
It's a good point. Very good point.
This is Susan. I might actually share that some of you may remember that in 2009, The Medical Society had a major fire, and actually we were allowing another company that paid us rent to operate a doctor's answering service that we had once upon a time owned. So they had purchased it from us. And I would come in the morning and I would smell smoke, and I would go upstairs and I would tell these ladies that, you can't be smoking, but there was no supervisor all the time watching what they were doing. And so at 10 o'clock on a Friday night, I got a phone call saying the office was burning. And so it was our belief that the same employee had probably put her last cigarette in the trash. But candidly, to move it forward, move the claim forward, they brought in the inspectors and determined that it was an electrical issue. So frankly, that was fine for us. The office we're in is a condo, so we had responsibility for the contents coverage, and the condo association had responsibility for the walls and then exterior coverage. It was a terribly difficult process to go through, and it took us only a year to rebuild, but fortunately we had the coverage to be able to relocate closely so that I could monitor the rebuilding. And we got back in like 361 days, but who was counting? So it was
But you were less
quite
than
the
a year.
ordeal. Well, and the things that even occurred during the process, it was middle of the winter then when they're rebuilding. The property is open to the elements, and a pipe froze and broke. So going back into the building, then there was a solid sheet of ice and broken pipes that they then also had to replace. So there's nothing like good insurance coverage, and we found also post fire that working with a company to help us determine our loss was also very helpful, because I would have never thought to make a claim for, copy paper that you just don't think about its value,
Yeah.
or, any number of things. So,
And that's
uh,
another thing too, Susan, just I had in my notes and I didn't bring up. Something else that's really helpful, and I recommend people do this in their homes as well, is walk around your house with a video camera
yes,
and
yes,
video every room, because if and God forbid something would happen, you can go back on that video because you might forget that you had that little whatever sitting in the corner that didn't take up much space, but it had sentimental value, or it had, economic value, financial value,
right.
that you just might not think about. So photos, videos are really important as well.
So after we completely did the rebuild and we refurnished, then we had a review of what our content should then be, because for all that we went through, there was a silver lining that we got rid of the orange 1960s chairs, and we were able to purchase much nicer things that we have today. So but does anybody have any questions for Shelly or Ron about this topic? You can just shout them out, you can put them in chat, whichever works better for you. And then I would also want to open it up to anyone who has any questions about any of the events that I mentioned, or anything else that's going on at the Medical Society now as well. Well, we'd
Well,
like to
Susan,
thank you for
can
your,
I just
yes.
do a quick,
Yeah, of
maybe
course.
a note out to the groups that
Oh,
are registered?
absolutely.
If anyone would want to reach out and have some follow-up conversation with us regarding, just your general insurance program or anything like that, we'd be happy to have some additional conversation and follow up. So
Why don't you put your email and your phone in chat?
we'll do that right
Yes.
now.
So I appreciate all of the practice staff joining us today. I shared with Shelly before we all got on that the Medical Society is very committed to your practices and trying to bring you quality education. Our challenge, though, post-COVID, is that when we talk with practice managers, one quote that I've heard recently was, I barely have the time to do what I have to do, much less what I would like to do. And education sometimes falls in the what I would like to do category. I know it's been suggested that we should have more in-person events. The question really is about how many people would participate and benefit from those kinds of activities. You've got to have a critical mass. I mean, today we had 8 registrants. We were pleased to do this for those of you who registered. But we want to make sure that in the Medical Society is a nonprofit and that we bring the value that can be of benefit to the greatest number of practices and people. So we're still looking for opportunities. And so we thought that this sort of, did not require much of your day, that you might be having lunch while you're doing this, and that's perfectly fine. And so we're looking for more topics, more ideas, more suggestions about how we can serve your practices more effectively. And so, I would just encourage you to email me or Farhana Arastu, who's on the call as well. We're both working on events and activities for 2024, and we would definitely be pleased to hear from you in terms of the ideas that you might have. So does anybody have any other thoughts or questions today? All right, well, don't forget to tune in for our next lunch break, which is coming up. We're going to be talking about whether or not to outsource billing with healthcare data management, and we will be getting information about that very soon. Also, please remember to register for our OSHA compliance education program. This is one of those educational programs that you can document that your staff attended if they're all sitting in front of a computer and they have the link. This is just another way to mitigate those penalties if your practice was reported for some reason. So we look forward to seeing you again. We thank you and we hope you have a great afternoon.
Thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you.